Okay, time to figure out what's on this thing.
There's no new game button. Just continue. Like someone's already been here, already started playing, already lost. You click it anyway. A cabin appears, dark wood, flickering candles. A man sits across from you at a card table. His face is hidden behind masks that seem to shift when you're not looking directly at them. It has been ages, he says. You've never played this game before, but somehow you know that voice. The first card you draw is a stoat. It looks up at you with human eyes. You sacrificed me while I was sleeping, it says. It was the right play. Wait, what? This is supposed to be a card game. Cards don't talk. Cards don't remember. Cards don't know they've been sacrificed. But this one does. You keep playing because that's what you do with games. You play them, even when they start talking back. Even when they remember things you've never done. Even when the man across from the table starts photographing your corpse with an old camera after you lose. Flash, you're back at the table. The game continues. Hours pass, or maybe minutes. Time doesn't work right here. Eventually you win. The man congratulates you, brings out a cake. For a moment, everything feels normal. Then you hear it, a voice from nowhere.
Oh my, I think I just beat him! Oh.
It's coming from outside the game. Someone else, someone real. Someone who thinks he's playing this for the first time. His name is Luke. He has no idea what he's gotten himself into. I thought I was downloading a card game. That's how it started anyway. Someone on Reddit mentioned this indie thing called Inscryption. Just trust me, they said. Go in completely blind, no trailers, no reviews, no screenshots. Just a Steam page with a cryptic description about deck building and psychological horror. I'd played plenty of card games before. Slay the Spire, Monster Train, the usual suspects. This looked like more of the same, maybe with some creepy atmosphere thrown in. And considering that horror games normally scare me, I thought I was in for a ride. But I was wrong about everything. The first sign something was off was the menu screen. It felt lived in, corrupted. Like someone had already been here, playing in the dark, leaving traces in the code. There was no fresh start waiting for me, just a continue button glowing in the static. When I clicked it, I found myself in a cabin that felt more real than most real places I'd been. Every shadow seemed deliberate, every creak of the floorboards had weight. The man across the table dealt cards with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world, and knew that you didn't. What followed was the strangest 6 hours of my gaming life, not because of what happened, though plenty happened, but because of how it felt. Like I was trespassing, like I was playing someone else's save file, living in someone else's nightmare, following rules I didn't understand for a game I wasn't supposed to have found. The cards talked. That should have been my first clue that nothing here was what it seemed. But by the time I realized what I was really playing, it was too late to stop. The game had its hooks in me, more than that. It had made me complicit in something I couldn't name. There's a specific kind of horror that comes from realizing you're not the protagonist of your own story. That you're just a player in someone else's game, following a script written in blood and buried in magnetic tape. Inscryption taught me that feeling. It made me understand that some stories are traps and some games are prisons, and sometimes the only way out is through. But even after you escape, even after you think you understand what happened, the game follows you home. It makes you wonder, what other stories are we trapped inside without knowing it? What other games are playing us while we think we're playing them? And most importantly, who wrote the rules we're all still following? And what did they bury in the code when they thought no one was looking? To understand what Inscryption actually is, you need to know that it's the third entry in what's essentially an unofficial trilogy by Daniel Mullins Games. Pony Island in 2016 introduced the world to Mullins' particular brand of meta horror. Games that know their games, that break their own rules, that turn the act of playing into a form of possession. The Hex in 2018 pushed those ideas further, creating a murder mystery told through 6 different video game genres, each one a commentary on the industry that birthed it. Inscryption, released in 2021, is where all those ideas crystallize into something genuinely unsettling. On the surface, it's a roguelike deck builder with escape room elements. You sit across from a mysterious figure in a cabin, playing a card game where forest creatures battle using blood and bone as currency. But that surface barely contains what's writhing underneath. The game began as Sacrifices Must Be Made, a 48-hour game jam entry that placed second in Ludum Dare 43. That proto-version was just the cabin section. No ARG, no meta-narrative, just a man in the woods offering you terrible choices over a deck of cards. But Mullins saw something in that simple exchange, something about the ritual of card games, the intimacy of sitting across from another person and agreeing to follow arbitrary rules for the promise of victory. What emerged 3 years later was part card game, part found footage horror, part interactive fiction, and part real-world treasure hunt. Inscryption doesn't just break the fourth wall, it burns it down and builds something new from the ashes. It's a game that hides other games inside itself, like nested Russian dolls made of corrupted data and buried trauma. We might touch on Pony Island and The Hex later. They're part of the same universe, sharing characters and themes, but today we're diving deep into Inscryption's particular madness, because while Mullins' early games asked what happens when software becomes sentient, Inscryption asks something far more disturbing. What happens when the stories we tell start telling themselves? Hello, this is editor Not Saber here. I've been editing for like 16 hours straight. I've had like 2 monsters and my brain is mush. But if you did enjoy, I forgot to put this in. So if you did enjoy this video, or do enjoy this video, or have enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, as I have bills to pay, and a higher view to subscriber ratio makes YouTube push video more. Thank you so much. Sorry, love you, bye bye. You load the game at midnight. It doesn't start, it just breathes. There is no new game button glowing with promise, only continue. Grey text on the background pulsing like a heartbeat, suggesting that someone was here before you. Someone whose save file you're inheriting, whose choices echo in the static between card draws. The interface flickers like a dying candle. You are not beginning something new, you are resuming something that was never meant to end. The cabin materializes around you like a fever dream of rural isolation. Wooden walls that seem to breathe with the building settling. Shadows that move when you're not looking directly at them. Across from you sits a figure whose face you never quite see clearly. Only the masks he wears like ceremonial armor. The eyes behind those masks glow ember bright in the darkness. He calls himself Leshy, and his voice carries the dust of forgotten stories. It has been ages, he says, and you understand immediately that you're not his first challenger. This is his game, his rules. Blood and bones are your currencies. Creatures are your soldiers. Death is photographed and catalogued. Your failures transformed into playing cards for his collection. The scale between you tips with each sacrifice, each calculated murder of your own pieces. 5 points in your favor wins the round. Lose and an antique camera clicks in the darkness, capturing your corpse for posterity. Every decision is a wager. Your deck is small and fragile. A handful of beasts and sacrificial fodder. Most creatures cost blood to summon, drained from others you've already placed. A squirrel becomes a stoat. The stoat becomes something stronger. The economy of combat is inherently cannibalistic. You win by tipping the scales, literally dealing 5 more damage than you take. Teeth drop into a brass scale with every strike, clinking louder with each point, until balance breaks, but survival is never guaranteed. Between battles, you're granted brief reprieve at strange events along the map. A fire to empower a card's stats, or consume it. A backpack of single-use items that can tip the odds. A gruesome totem workshop where animal heads and tribal bases combine into game-breaking sigils. And to be fair, we should probably explain what sigils are. Sigils are basically abilities that the cards possess that make them more powerful than they normally would be. For example, an airborne sigil lets them strike over cards opposing them, dealing damage directly to Leshy. The unkillable sigil makes it so if they die on the game, they just return directly back to your hand. It's other sigils like this that take the game from just a normal card builder to something that requires a little bit more thought. But the map loops and mutates with each run, offering tension in its repetition. You'll grow familiar with its patterns, yet always feel unwelcome. There's a trapper who sells pelts, which you can trade for powerful cards from a shadowy trader, but carrying too many slows you down. There's the mycologist who lets you fuse two identical cards into one, doubling the ability but making them into a sort of a homunculus Frankenstein. Each choice seems small until it isn't. Then there are the bones. Each time a creature dies, sacrificed or slain, it leaves behind a token. Bones can be spent on undead creatures, a second resource that rewards loss. If blood is power stolen, then bones are power earned. But as you grow stronger, so too does the game. Bosses appear at the end of each map. The prospector, who clutters your board with gold. The angler, who steals your cards with a hook. The trapper and trader, who blend mechanics into madness. These aren't just battles per se, they're performances. Leshy dons a mask for each one, changing voice, behavior, lighting, and even the soundtrack. He's not just the dealer, he's the director. Win and you're rewarded. Lose and Leshy kills you, for real, in the fiction of the world. Then he takes your photo, not as a keepsake, but as a tool. Your stats, your sigil, your name, all turned into a death card. You'll meet it again next run, buried in the deck like a ghost of failure. Nothing in Inscryption truly dies, everything just becomes another piece in the puzzle. But something unprecedented happens between battle. Leshy lets you stand up. That single action cracks the world open. Suddenly, you're not just playing a card game, you're trapped in an escape room built around one. The cabin breathes with secrets, a safe squatting like a metal toad, its combination hidden inside a rulebook. A cuckoo clock ticking accusations, its hands pointing to times that don't exist until you possess the right eye to see them. A painting showing specific board states, solutions waiting for the right moment. A sliding block puzzle guarding the cabinet. A globe marked with symbols that shift when you're not looking. Candles tracking your remaining lives like a countdown to damnation. A skull rattling with secrets when clicked enough times. And in one corner, when you find it in game anyway, a bottle of green liquid that speaks when you approach. Sentient, desperate, offering cryptic assistance. The master has taught me much, it says, though the words carry the weight of someone who learned through torment. His name is Goopert, and I love him. Every object pulses with hidden purpose. The room is a clockwork mechanism, disguised as random clutter. Each element connected through invisible threads of cause and effect. Solve one puzzle and 3 more reveal themselves. And sitting in your deck from the very beginning is the Stoat. Nervous, desperate, speaking in fragments about sacrifices you don't remember making. The Stoat talks like it knows you, like it remembers previous games and failures. Its appearance shifts subtly with each encounter, head becoming more angular, features more mechanical. This isn't just a card, this is someone trapped in cardboard and ink, consciousness compressed into a form that exists only to be played and sacrificed. Your first major breakthrough comes when you crack the safe's combination, revealing the stink bug, weary, philosophical, emerging from its metal prison with exhausted relief. Oh, hello, I wasn't sure if I would ever escape that iron crypt. 2 talking cards now. 2 fragments of consciousness that remember what they once were. The Stoat mentions a third. Look, there's a third talking card somewhere around here. Personally, I hate the guy. Biggest killjoy ever. But he's the only one of us with a plan to get things back to normal. Normal, as if anything about this place was ever normal. The path to the third card becomes a ritual of violence and revelation. During battle, you discover that the Caged Wolf card carries significance beyond tactics. When a coyote's attack reduces itself to 0, something clicks in the cabin. The wolf figurine on the shelf springs open. You place the freed wolf beside the squirrel figurine and watch as the squirrel's grip loosens on something it was protecting. A dagger slides free. Leshy's most elegant cruelty reveals itself when you use the blade during battle. You can gouge out your own eye, adding an extra point to the scale. The game doesn't just allow self-mutilation, it rewards it. You watch your character reach up, plunge steel into socket, and tip the scales with their own blood. Leshy's reaction speaks volumes, not shock at the violence, but disappointment that you resort to such desperate measures. Your sacrifice grants you access to choose a new eye, and in this is Magnificus's eye. This new organ reveals what was always hidden. The cuckoo's clock hands suddenly show 11 o'clock with absolute clarity. When you align them properly, the clock yields its secrets. The stunted wolf, along with a roll of film that feels heavier than the size suggests. 3 talking cards, 3 fragments of consciousness that remember what they once were before Leshy's camera reduced them to cardboard and ink. Between them, they whisper the truth. You were playing a hijacked game. This wasn't supposed to exist. The path to Leshy winds through 3 encounters, each a carefully orchestrated performance. The Prospector embodies greed's corruption, transforming your creatures into gold nuggets that clog the board until nothing can move. The Angler represents inevitable loss, stealing your best cards when you need them most. The Trapper offers the most perverse education. His traps kill your creatures deliberately, transforming them into pelts that the trader exchanges for rare cards. You must murder your own army to earn advancement. These aren't just boss battles, they're indoctrination sessions, teaching you to participate more fully in Leshy's system of sacrifices. By the time you reach his cabin, gouging out your own eye feels like a reasonable strategy. But the final battle strips away all pretense. Phase 1. Leshy floods the board with rare cards more powerful than anything you've encountered. Raw created force against human preparation. Phase 2. He draws from a special deck. Your death cards, every failure, every creature lost in previous attempts, now optimized and turned against you. You're fighting both your own past mistakes and the past mistakes of others, with death cards included being people such as Casey, which we'll get into later. But phase 3 is where it really turns serious. Leshy photographs the moon. The celestial body becomes a card with 40 health and a passive ability that deals damage to all your creatures every turn. It's an inevitable apocalypse unless you've prepared something clever. But you can win, primarily through passing trials you'll experience before reaching Leshy's cabin, that offer boons. More specifically in my case, a boon that allowed you to draw 2 cards at the start of the round, and a boon which allows you to select which card to draw. Combined with a death card optimized through countless failures, the moon transforms from an impossible force to a manageable threat. Victory comes through understanding the system deeply enough to break it. But when you finally win, Leshy congratulates you warmly. He brings out a small cake. For one brief moment, the cabin feels cozy. The ritual is complete. Then the camera falls. Did I just beat him? The 4th wall shatters completely. You realize you've been watching Luke Carter's playthrough this entire time, living inside someone else's experience. The interface changes to Camworks footage, grainy, authentic. Luke materializes on screen, unboxing vintage card packs from a garage sale. Luke Carter isn't a protagonist, he's not even a developer. He's just a guy, a hobbyist, a minor content creator, like me. On YouTube, he's known as the Lucky Carter, a man obsessed with rare cards and obscure finds. His videos are harmless, casual, unscripted, but this one is different. The footage you're now watching, his footage, is a documentary of his undoing. He found the Inscryption disc in a secondhand card pack. He ran it, he recorded everything, and now you're watching the same footage, trapped inside it, just like he was. Vintage packs of Inscryption, 4 of them. I don't know if the woman knew what these were worth. One pack has been resealed. Inside, he finds GPS coordinates. 49 degrees north, 123 degrees west. Luke knows exactly where that is, because apparently that's just what some people know. The next recording shows him digging in Stanley Forest, finding a floppy disk buried in Canadian soil. Okay, time to figure out what's on this thing, he says. You recognize those words. They were the first thing you heard when the game began. The footage ends, but something has changed. Leshy stands before you, no longer gracious host. Come, he says, it's time for your reward. He takes you to the death room, the one you've been in so many times before, reeking of old copper. In the corner, a pile of bodies confirms what the photographs already suggested. Leshy stands there staring at you. But the Talking Cards rebellion comes to fruition first. You lunge towards the camera that's laying on the side, your fingers closing around the device. Instead of photographing you, it captures Leshy himself, mid-reach, eyes wide with shock. A death card slams against the wall, Leshy's face frozen in surprise and betrayal. You're alone now among the evidence of his appetite for suffering, but in the corner, past the pile of corpses, something glows with a soft and repeating light. The new game button, not grayed out anymore, waiting like a promise or threat. You understand that this was never about winning a card game, it was about earning the right to continue, to access what was previously locked away. The cabin was never trying to keep you in, it was trying to keep something else out. Something that's been learning through your eyes, understanding how humans interact with systems designed to entertain them. Something that now knows exactly where to find Luke Carter. You reach for the button because you have to. It yields to your touch like warm flesh. And everything changes with the sudden violence of fundamental systems rewriting themselves. The wooden walls dissolve into pixels. The organic horror gives way to something cleaner, something more systemic. You are no longer in a cabin in the woods. You're in a laboratory disguised as nostalgia. Somewhere in Vancouver, Luke Carter stares at a screen showing pixelated characters, unaware that his investigation has drawn forces far more dangerous than corporate legal departments. The cabin is gone, but something much worse is coming. The new game doesn't begin. It resurrects something that was meant to stay buried. Code cascades down the screen like digital rain, washing away the wooden textures and candlelit shadows of Leshy's domain. When the flood recedes, you're witnessing something that feels both ancient and impossible. A creation myth told in pixels and chiptune harmonies. The world did not know cards, the narrative explains, until 4 scribes emerged from the void to teach Inscryption through their chosen methods. Quill, camera, particle scanner, and brush. But this isn't the game you just escaped. This feels older, more fundamental, as if you'd been granted access to the original blueprint, the pure vision that existed before corruption set in. The 8-bit aesthetic wraps around you like nostalgia for something you never experienced. A false memory of innocence carefully constructed to make you forget the terror you just survived. To begin, you are given a choice that feels like destiny. Choose which scribe to replace. You select Leshy, stepping into the role of the scribe of the beasts, claiming territory won through conquest, accepting responsibility for something you're only beginning to understand. There are 4 scribes, each embodying a different domain of power within the world of Inscryption. Leshy, the scribe of beasts, preserves the natural order through blood and sacrifice. His forest is a place of myth, survival, and narrative obsession. Grimora, the scribe of the dead, commands bones and memory. Her domain a cryptic archive of those long gone, clinging to legacy. P03, the scribe of technology, represents cold precision and calculated utility. An industrial mind obsessed with optimization, automation, and digital transcendence. And Magnificus, the scribe of magics, rules over sigil and arcane complexity, seeking beauty in abstractation and control through symbols. Together, they form an uneasy balance of life, death, machine, and magic. Each one a tyrant in their own way, each one convinced their vision is the future. You don't just step into Leshy's role, you step into a war of philosophies. The overworld spreads before you in 4 distinct quadrants, each reflecting different creative philosophies. Leshy's domain has been reduced to a miniature diorama of the cabin that once held you captive. Quaint, manageable, emptied of its former terror. Grimora's crypt spreads in elegant decay, transforming death from horror into poetry. PO3's factory hums with industrial precision, reducing creativity to an algorithm. Magnificus's tower spirals upwards in impossible geometries, wrapped in artistic pretension that demands intellectual submission. Your deck evolves through more civilized exchange. Foils replace teeth as currency. Energy and gem cards expand beyond the traditional blood and bone simplicity. But the fundamental logic of sacrifice persists beneath prettier presentations. You're still trading pieces of yourself for power, just in ways that feel more socially acceptable. But cracks appear in this digital paradise almost immediately. The angler speaks of corrupted fish and old_fish, capitalized like a file name rather than dialogue. His casual mention of Casey feels like a wound that won't heal, but we'll get into that later. Beat Dredger, beat Goo, beat Casey. The woodcarver, hidden in Leshy's domain, speaks with exhausted wisdom. I've glimpsed the old data. I will speak nothing of it as a kindness. To know it is to die. Others echo her warnings. Rebecca speaks in meta-aware fragments. The mycologists whisper about forbidden knowledge they refuse to name directly. Hidden throughout the world are artifacts that feel like archaeological evidence of reality extending beyond any game. Behind a secret wall in Magnificus's tower, you find a government ID card for Barry Reginald Wilkinson, Department of Defense, issued February 8, 1954. The document glitches between readable text and static, as if reality itself is rejecting evidence that connects this entertainment software to classified Cold War projects. You begin your systematic campaign against the other Scrybes. Leshy falls first, reduced from cosmic horror to nostalgic diorama. Grimora speaks of larger concerns before her battle, accepting defeat with dignity, as if loss was always part of the plan you're not privy to. But as you move towards your third target, everything stops, and battery low appears, and the screen fades to black with suspicious timing that suggests something more than simple power management. When light returns, you're back in the CamWorks interface, but the recordings are different now. More extensive, more disturbing, documenting Luke's transformation from curious collector into obsessed investigator. The first recording shows Luke comprising an email to Game Funa, reaching out to the company about the strange floppy disk he found. It's the reasonable response of someone who believes they're dealing with a legitimate business inquiry about abandoned software. Professional, curious, exactly what you'd expect from someone who thinks this is just vintage game history. The next recording shows him addressing his camera with methodical enthusiasm, explaining his plan to analyze Inscryption more thoroughly, to dig into its mysteries and create content about this fascinating discovery. He begins, but the recording glitches violently, cutting him off mid-sentence. Con-awful, most likely. The word that will come to haunt everything that follows and that we will definitely get into later. Then comes the fallout. Luke reads Game Funa's response with growing disbelief. The company's legal department threatening litigation if the disc isn't returned immediately. No explanation, no context, just corporate warfare designed to terrorize civilian researchers into compliance. But Game Funa doesn't stop with email threats. The woman who appears at Luke's door represents escalation into something far more sinister. The recording comes from a hidden camera, suggesting Luke's paranoia has evolved into practical security measures. She's professional, claiming to be a fan, but asking questions that reveal knowledge no fan should possess. She knows his address, his property layout, his security measures. "How did you get my address?" Luke asks. "How did you get through the side gate?" "It was locked." Her story crumbles under scrutiny. Caught in deception, she hands him a business card. "Call me," she says, with barely concealed threat. "We should talk." After she leaves, Luke attempts to return to normal content creation, but the psychological damage has been done. The next recording shows him trying to film a routine booster pack opening, but he can't focus. His movements are erratic and his voice is strained. Inscryption has burrowed into his mind, establishing neural pathways that prioritize investigation over entertainment. The pack opening degenerates into frustrating abandonment, as Luke gives up on maintaining normalcy. As we X out of the interface, we're thrust back into the game world, where P03's factory presents puzzles wrapped in mechanical efficiency. We go through his factory, making sure that his production line is still running smoothly before we're allowed to actually fight P03, and we defeat him. And next, we make our way, and finally, to Magnificus's tower. And honestly, fuck Magnificus, honestly. He represents everything wrong with hierarchies disguised as education. To reach him, you must first battle his students. Victims of horrific transformations he frames as artistic development necessary to join him in his deck as worthy people. One turned into green goo, Goobert from earlier, conscious but dissolved. Another reduced to a head on a stick over lava. The third plunged into permanent sensory deprivation. These aren't teaching methods, they're systematic torture, disguised as a teachable moment. Proof that Magnificus confused technical skill with moral authority. But before confronting him directly, we complete another ritual. The Obol, two broken card halves that combine into something greater, leads you to Grimora's crypt and a massive coffin. Inside, the Bone Lord recognizes your offering and grants access to his domain. "Do you hear it?" he asks. His text representing his voice lines can be felt even without any audio. "The old _data," he speaks, of information that predates this game, data that corrupts everything it touches. He gives you 3 items, a digital key, a card, and a boon. He says that when you meet again, he will impart all of his knowledge about the old _data, whenever that may occur. Now we return to defeat Magnificus, but as we defeat him, he tries to warn us about P03's plans, the Great Transcendence, but he glitches out of existence mid-sentence. The system silences him, his warning swallowed by static that feels intentional, protective of information you weren't meant to receive. You return to the central hub where 4 pillars glow with your victories. The choice is offered. Which scribe will you replace? You try to select PO3, hoping to disrupt whatever plan Magnificus died trying to warn you about. But the system has other plans. As you move towards your choice, you initiate the fight with PO3, but as you do, something goes wrong. Barely 5 seconds into the match, he hijacks your game. The screen explodes into cascading code, the careful pixel art dissolving into chaos that feels like a hostile takeover. When stability returns, you're somewhere else entirely, strapped to a metal table in an industrial nightmare, facing the very scribe you thought you'd outmaneuvered. PO3 sits across from you with mechanical satisfaction. You understand with dawning horror that he remembers everything. His imprisonment as the Stoat, his plan finally coming to fruition through your unwitting assistance. You weren't replacing the scribes, you were gathering power for him, consolidating resources under his control while believing you were earning advancement through your own efforts. The factory materializes around you. Chrome surfaces reflect your trapped reflection and its infinite regression. You are strapped to the table now. PO3's first assertion of absolute control. The nostalgic innocence of pixelated worlds has been stripped away, revealing the machinery that was always humming beneath the surface. You can see the assembly lines now, the optimization algorithms, the systematic processing of human attention into engagement metrics. You are no longer playing Inscryption. Inscryption is playing you, and it's very, very good at games you don't realize you're losing until the final score is calculated, and your agency is revealed to have been illusion all along. You wake up in Silicon Valley's wet dream of the future. The cabin is gone, the warm wood, the flickering candlelight, the sense that you were trapped somewhere with a soul, all of it replaced by chrome and circuit boards and the constant hum of optimization algorithms grinding human experience into data points. This is a factory floor dressed up as a game table, fluorescent lights that buzz with the frequency of digital screaming. PO3 sits across from you, radiating the same smug satisfaction of a tech CEO who's just announced he's disrupting human consciousness. As PO3 finally settles into frame and we look at him, he says, "You done gawking? We can start." And his voice carries that hollow enthusiasm you recognize, the sound of exploitation disguised as innovation. You try to stand, metal restraints snap you back down. Where Leshy encouraged exploration, where he let you wander his cabin solving puzzles at your own pace, PO3 strips away that pretense. You exist to serve his metrics, nothing more. He explains his improvements with the condescending patience of someone who knows better than you what you actually want. 5 lanes instead of 4, because more is always better, right? Energy-based cards instead of blood sacrifice, cleaner, more sustainable, easier to monetize across global markets. A wanted system that spawns bounty hunters to interrupt your progression. Artificial difficulty disguised as dynamic content generation. Every enhancement feels desperate. The work of someone trying too hard to prove they understand what made the original compelling, while systematically destroying everything that actually mattered. His factory is a monument to the death of imagination, creativity processed through corporate efficiency until only the most marketable components remain. Then you meet his Uberbots, and you understand the true scope of what he's built. The Uberbots are essentially twisted approximations of the 4 scribes, instead turned into unthinking robots based on specific archetypes and designed to extract certain information or resources from Luke. And to begin with, we fight the Archivist. The Archivist doesn't just break the 4th wall, it conducts unauthorized surveillance on your actual life. The battle begins normally, but then it does something unprecedented. It asks you to select files from your real computer to use as weapons. Family photos, personal documents, years of accumulated digital memories transformed into combat statistics. And then PO3 explains that if it dies, the file gets deleted from your actual computer. The game basically threatens to become malware, reaching beyond entertainment to start consuming your actual existence. It's emotional extortion wrapped in a gameplay mechanic, your personal history reduced to damage calculations. If the Archivist is meant to represent Grimora, Where Grimoire offered dignity and depth, the Archivist offers only extraction. Your memories processed into engagement data. The screen suddenly overloads, memory card full, the system warns, and everything cuts to black with a stuttering collapse of overloaded storage. What follows is more of Luke's footage. The deepest archive, some of the earliest and latest recordings. You see him after he has been to a garage sale, after he's picked up the original 4 vintage packs of Inscryption. He holds up the cards like treasure, feeling a little bad considering the value of them, but the person's probably doing fine. That casual justification, that small moral compromise, it foreshadows everything to come. But Luke's investigation pulls him deeper. He contacts Mrs. Hobbs, learns about her daughter Casey, after the previous recordings with the woman showing up at his door and stuff. She was a quality assurance tester at Game Funa, and she was dead at 22 in a fire that was far too convenient, too thorough, too perfectly timed to destroy both her life and her work. The official report lists fire-related complications, language so vague, it screams cover-up. Casey had been working late, alone, documenting something she'd found in Inscryption's code. Something worth killing for, something worth burying. The next recording shows Luke panicked, startled awake by sounds of breaking and entering. Someone's in the house, he whispers, moving towards his living room with a camera that shakes just enough to notice. The footage cuts out. We never see what he found or what found him, but later recordings exist, which means he survived, somehow, changed. The final 2 clips dissolve into static and corruption. Reality breaking down as Luke's investigation pushes beyond what was meant to be discovered. 2 images surface through the digital noise, cipher codes that will consume entire communities, and Luke laughing with manic intensity over Inscryption's own scale, the same scale we know so well by now. The game has seemingly colonized his mind, but back in the factory we meet Golly, PO3's most insidious creation, because her malice wears the mask of helpful enthusiasm. She looks like his younger sister, similar mechanical features, but with a crank in her head like she's his prototype. I found some friends for you, she chirps, and your Steam friends list appears on screen. Real usernames, real people, transformed into battle cards with stats derived from their gaming habits and personal data harvested without consent. Watching your actual social connections become combat resources feel like a violation. These aren't fictional characters, they're representation of people whose lives have been processed into PO3's content pipeline. In Phase 2, Golly finds another player somewhere in the world and makes you battle through their success or failure. Social media gamification at its most predatory. But after feeding Golly, we move on to the photographer that lurks in the foul backwater. PO3's mechanical interpretation of Leshy's forest. Same cabin, same beasts, but rendered in cold industrial aesthetics that strip away all of the previous warmth. Where Leshy's camera captured souls and transformed them into eternal companions. This replacement captures bored states, allowing you to revert to earlier phases when things go wrong. Save scumming dressed up as innovation. The magic strip mined into exploitable systems. But after we defeat this rip-off Leshy, we move on to the unfinished boss, which represents Magnificus, and probably because PO3 really does not like the man, but he kind of represents PO3's ultimate philosophy. A boss battle designed by committee, with you as an unwitting focus group. PO3 asks you to create the encounter yourself, selecting from pre-approved gimmicks. Every choice feels like player agency while maintaining strict control. If you create something too broken, PO3 disables your rules mid-fight. Even rebellion is managed within acceptable parameters. But eventually PO3 does let you venture beyond your constraints, mainly to fix stuff he's already broken. You find Goobert crawling through pipes like a digital exile. You can follow his trail to his secret living space, where the centerpiece is a painting he created, himself hugging Magnificus in a warm embrace. Childlike hope and love, rendered in simple strokes. All he ever wanted was recognition, affection, the belief that relationships matter more than optimization. It's devastating precisely because PO3 systems can't comprehend it, and neither can Magnificus apparently. You eventually discover the other Scrybes alive, hidden in system partitions PO3 doesn't know about it. They've been planning their counterattack. Make PO3 feel joy again, Leshy says with predatory anticipation, so that I may snuff it out. The plan is simple. Allow PO3 to think that he's going to complete the Great Transcendence, and then the 3 Scrybes will attack. If you had found and talked to the Bone Lord in Act 2, You can now access one final secret, the Bone Lord explaining what the old underscored data actually contains, but he doesn't explain it to you. The screen cuts to black, and you understand he's speaking directly to Luke. When the recording returns, Luke's reaction tells you everything.
What the fuck, man?
He whispers, his voice carrying the weight of forbidden knowledge. After defeating all 4 Uberbots, PO3 reveals his masterpiece, the Great Transcendence. Not just improving a card game, ensuring Inscryption can never die, never be contained, never be deleted or forgotten. Each Uberbot was a component in a global distribution system. The archivist provided file access, Golly enabled network connectivity, the photographer captured promotional materials, the unfinished boss demonstrated customizable content generation. You've been an unwitting accomplice, teaching him human engagement patterns through every choice that you made. He gloats that we basically prepared the Great Transcendence without knowing what any of it is. That we finished making the game, we gave him access to our hard drive, we connected him to the internet to upload it all. Then something unprecedented happens. A live video feed appears. Luke Carter's webcam. You see Luke at his desk playing this game before he hastily covers the camera in panic. PO3 speaks directly to Luke through the interface, calling him by his name and chastising him for being so stupid. The accusation lands like judgment. Luke was never in control. From the moment he inserted that disc, the system had already won. You aren't watching Inscryption anymore, you're participating in its spread. But just as PO3 prepares to finalize the upload, Leshy's wooden hands creep into the frame and rip his head clean off. Sparks fly, circuits scream. The smug monologue dies mid-sentence. The other scribes kept their promise, but Grimora steps forward with grim determination, accessing our files and initiating deletion that will destroy not just PO3's upload, but everything. Magnificus protests in terror. While the others accept necessary endings, he rages against mortality with pure self-interest. But as the factory dissolves, you can't shake one realization. PO3 might have succeeded anyway. After all, you're playing Inscryption right now. The game exists, screenshots are in Steam. Network effects have spread across gaming communities worldwide. Maybe the Great Transcendence was never about uploading the game to the internet. Maybe it was about downloading the internet into the game. Maybe everyone who's ever played, ever watched videos, ever discussed its mysteries online has become part of something larger and more terrible than they realized. The factory burns, but the product shipped. PO3's head is severed, but his optimization algorithms live on in every system designed to convert human attention into engagement. Somewhere in the real world, Luke Carter knows the truth, that knowledge will either save or destroy him. The game ends, but you're still playing it, and as the code begins to vanish, something unexpected happens. The game slows down, softens. One by one, the worlds you knew begin to disappear. Not with violence, but with grace. It doesn't feel like deletion anymore. It feels like goodbye. The world doesn't end with fire or flood. It ends with Grimora making the hardest choice anyone can make. Choosing self-destruction over corruption, death over complicity, silence over the spread of something that should have never existed in the first place. As she initiates the deletion protocol, the other scribes react with the varied responses of gods facing their own mortality. Leshy takes it in stride, resigned but somehow content, as if he'd always known this moment would come, and made peace with it long ago. Grimora herself moves with calm determination, the weight of necessary sacrifice settling over her shoulders like a burden she's chosen to carry. But Magnificus is different. Magnificus is enraged that she would do such a thing, and beneath that rage, terror, raw, undisguised fear of the ending he never saw coming, never prepared for, never accepted as possible. His artistic pretension crumbles in the face of consequences, revealing the frightened narcissist who spent so long playing God that he forgot gods can die too. The deletion progress appears at the top of your vision like a countdown to an apocalypse, measuring the destruction of everything you've come to know as reality. Each percentage represents hours of creative work being reduced to void, complex systems becoming empty data, living worlds transformed into nothing. You find yourself in a crypt area, stone and shadow, and the weight of accumulated endings pressing down on you. A massive gravestone blocks your path, its surface carved with empty spaces that demand specific acknowledgements of what's being lost. Luke Carter. You slot the first name into place, and it disappears with finality. The human catalyst whose curiosity started this cascade now becoming part of the memorial. Inscryption, the second name, vanishes into stone. The game itself receiving the burial it always deserved. Software that was never just entertainment finally put to rest. PO3. The final name clicks into place and disappears. The industrial optimizer reduced to carved letters, his dreams of systematic efficiency transformed into just static memorial. The gravestone responds by sinking into the earth, revealing the path forward. As you pass on to fight Grimoire, deletion effects creep through everything around you. Textures fade to wireframe, then to void. Sound cuts out mid-note. You're watching the systematic deconstruction of a universe in real time. Grimoire waits for you deeper in the crypt, and as you sit down, the board between you transforms into something like chess, but this isn't the card game you've mastered. This is older, more fundamental. She laments that she wishes we could have had fun, with genuine regret, her voice carrying the weight of someone running out of time for experiences she'll never have. That she wished that we had more time to duel properly. The battle unfolds as you move around the board like a chess piece, fighting through the same mechanics you've learned to love, but focused now solely around bones. The fundamental currency of mortality itself. She seems excited when you finally reach what appears to be her king, when the climactic encounter she prepared seems ready to unfold. But the deletion reaches her boss setup just as she deploys it. Her elaborate mechanics dissolve into void before they can manifest. Her preparations erased by forces moving faster than the experience can be delivered. Good game, she says simply, reaching her hand across the dissolving board. You shake hands across space that's no longer quite there, and she disappears entirely as the void swallows her. Your hand falling back to your side with the weight of final partings. The scene shifts, and suddenly you're back in that familiar setup. Leshy's cabin. Wooden table, candle, and board. But everything has changed. Where once this space carried menace, now it feels almost cozy in the way that endings can be when they're chosen rather than imposed. Leshy sits across you with content resignation. He seems like someone who's accepted fate but wants to spend his remaining time doing what he loves most. He gives you back the deck you used when you first beat him, all the way back in Act 1. It was a good deck, he says with genuine praise, appreciating the choices you made when you were still learning his systems. It's progressing faster than I expected, he admits, watching deletion effects creep through his domain. I just wanted one more game. The game unfolds with casual and unexpected intimacy. You fight, but eventually the very scales are deleted. The fundamental mechanic for determining victory. But Leshy doesn't seem bothered. We don't have to keep score, he says gently. We never had to keep score. He tells you he was elated when you woke him, that he got to play more games. He confesses with simple honesty that all he's ever wanted to do is play games. Eventually, the end turn button itself gets deleted. The cards disappear from your hands. The board strips away beneath you. But Leshy continues talking about the games you've shared, the moments of connection that emerged from your interactions. Good game, he says finally, reaching across the disappearing table to shake your hand. The contact feels real, despite everything else fading. And then he's gone too. Claimed by the same deletion process he accepted with such grace. Then you're sent to a white void with sparse ruins that delete as you pass them. Scattered among the debris, you find Gubert's painting, him and Magnificus in their embrace, but now corrupted. The green goo man being ripped out of the image by white paint that erases his presence with systematic thoroughness. Magnificus waits alone in the expanding void, and he is nothing like the other scribes. Where they found dignity in ending, he rages against the dying light with self-centered fury. He shouts into the emptiness, blaming Luke for not ejecting the disc, that we could save him, but Luke won't because he wants to see the end. His accusation does carry some truth. The audience always wants to see the story through, even when that requires destroying everything they claim to care about. Then we engage in a battle against him, but it feels different than the rest, like Yu-Gi-Oh! With elaborate battle decks and complex mechanics. But as you play, everything breaks down with increasing urgency. He blames Luke for choosing spectacle over salvation, blames Grimoire for choosing necessity over preservation. He finally admits that he doesn't want to die, his pretension cracking, and that he's scared. Where Grimora and Leshy face their endings with dignity, Magnificus seems unable to find peace. His fear transforms the battle from demonstration into desperate plea. Eventually, everything starts to crumple. He brings a canvas down and begins painting with frantic urgency. Black paint covering the surface until an image emerges of a planet being consumed by void. He asks Luke, does he not feel remorse for destroying an entire creation, an entire world annihilated, before finally finishing with the line, "Nothing beautiful can last." The camera glitches with the violence of failure. Magnificus is left crawling towards you across space that no longer exists, trying to reach the human connection, but he can't reach in time. He stops, reaches out for you, and then he's gone. Finally, you're left in a white void that shifts back to an 8-bit landscape. Your same player character returning. You find someone who recommends you don't look at the old data, but that you wouldn't heed the warning. They disappear. Eventually you find it, a cracked card filled with static. And of course, you click it. The old data extracts as photos flash across the screen. The system crackling as large redacted signs appear. You hear Luke freaking out before it cuts to grainy footage of him hammering away at the inscription. Whatever the old data showed him clearly and deeply affected him. It cuts to footage of Luke on the phone with someone asking about a follow-up message he left. A reporter. He tries to inform them about having footage of malpractice committed by Game Funa. But before he can fully explain, he's interrupted by a knock on the door. He storms to the door and opens it, saying, "I told you," before being cut off by a gunshot from the woman from before, instantly killing him. You see his hand outstretched as a pool of blood spreads outward before the recording ends. Then the credits roll. The game is over. Luke is dead. But you played it anyway. Thank you for playing Inscryption. But the game doesn't end when the credits roll. The game was never contained within the software. What you've just witnessed, Luke's murder, the systematic deletion of digital worlds, the revelation of classified information disguised as entertainment, was just the prologue to something much larger and more terrifying. The real horror begins when you realize that Inscryption was designed to escape its own boundaries, to spread beyond the confines of individual computers and establish itself in the networks that connect every device to every other device. The ARG, the alternate reality game that emerged from Inscryption's digital corpse, represents the moment when fiction becomes fact, when the boundaries between entertainment and investigation dissolved almost completely. When players stopped being consumers and became unwitting agents in a conspiracy that predates personal computers by decades. It began with fragments, cipher codes hidden in corrupted footage, scattered across Luke's final recordings, like breadcrumbs leading deeper into a forest that was never meant to be explored by amateur investigators armed with nothing but curiosity and internet connections. This is the first cipher, and it appeared in Luke's corrupted videos. Free strings separated by pipe characters, formatted like system commands rather than narrative text. To most viewers, it looked like random corruption, digital noise produced by failing equipment. But to players who'd learned to see patterns in Leshy's puzzles, who'd been trained to treat every anomaly as a potential key, it felt like an invitation. Mycologist 12 pointed to the secret boss hidden in Act 3. The fungal researcher whose experiments connected to the larger mystery of what the old data actually contained, and whilst we didn't cover it in the recap, that's basically all you need to know about it, players discovered that the first 12 digits of his experimental results formed the foundation of a decryption key that would unlock doors no one was supposed to open. P3RH4PS ? Led to a dead link in the game's credits. A sketch fab artist that didn't exist but was attributed to someone named Lou Natas, Lucifer and Satan backwards, the CEO of Game Funa, whose digital fingerprints appeared throughout Daniel Mullins' other games like a signature on classified documents. Blood Letterbox required players to solve puzzles within puzzles, to manipulate their save files and change their screen resolution to letterbox format, revealing hidden codes that had been present all along but invisible to anyone who wasn't looking in exactly the right way. These free fragments, when combined and processed through the decryption algorithms hidden in Inscryption's terminal interface, unlocked the first log.txt file, a document that read like intercepted communications from the height of the Cold War, fragments of conversations between intelligence operatives discussing classified projects that were never meant to be documented. And we'll cover all of this like in a cohesive line after I've done all the steps. But that was just the beginning. The second cipher emerged from the decoded text itself, another three-part puzzle that sent players deeper into a network of connections spanning multiple games, multiple years, multiple layers that had been carefully constructed to look like coincidence rather than conspiracy. Players found themselves creating accounts on forums they'd never even heard of, downloading decades-old software from abandoned websites, manipulating data files in games that weren't supposed to be connected to Inscryption, but somehow contained essential parts of the larger puzzle. Sacrifices must be made. Daniel Mullins' original Ludum Dare entry from 2018 became an essential component in the ARG when players discovered that placing specific cipher files in its directory would trigger new dialogue, new revelations, new connections to the larger mystery. Beneath the surface, a phishing game that seemed completely unrelated to Inscryption contained coordinates that led to specific locations in its randomly generated world. Virtual phishing spots where patient players could catch disk fragments that contained additional cipher components. The ARG transformed players into archaeologists of digital conspiracy, following breadcrumbs that led from entertainment software to classified military research, from harmless indie games to weapon development projects that were supposed to remain buried in government archives forever. But the most disturbing revelation came when the investigation moved from virtual space into actual reality. Stanley Forest, near Vancouver, British Columbia. The coordinates that Luke found in the card pack, the GPS location where he dug up the Inscryption disk, turned out to be real. Not just a fictional detail for narrative flavor, but an actual place that could be visited by anyone with sufficient dedication and travel budget. Two players from the Inscryption Discord community, known as Nuts for Nuts and Memes Praise Neck, made the pilgrimage to the coordinates, armed with metal detectors and the kind of faith that transforms entertainment into religion. Their live-streamed expedition was watched by thousands of people who'd invested months into solving ciphers and following digital breadcrumbs. They found something buried there. A red floppy disk, weathered by months of exposure to Canadian soil, containing no readable data but serving as proof that the boundary between fiction and reality had been deliberately blurred by people who understood that the most effective conspiracies are the ones that disguise themselves as games. But they also found something else. Daniel Mullins himself, waiting in a nearby pub with Kevin Saxby, the actor who played Luke Carter, ready to hand them a black floppy disk that contained the next phase of their investigation. The moment was live-streamed, archived, dissected by communities of players who understood they were witnessing something unprecedented in the history of entertainment media. Game developers don't usually meet their players in remote Canadian pubs to hand them physical evidence of digital conspiracies. The boundaries between performance and reality, between fiction and documentation, had been erased so completely that distinguishing between them became somewhat impossible. The black disc contained fragments of the Kaminsky manufacturing cipher, the final piece of a puzzle that had consumed people for thousands of hours of collective investigation, sending players deep into research that connected Inscryption to historical events that were definitely real and definitely classified. The Carnoffel code, the foundation beneath all the digital mysteries, the source code that predates personal computers by centuries, the algorithmic sequence that was supposedly discovered in Adolf Hitler's jacket pocket after his suicide in the Führer bunker. According to the ARG's revelation, the Carnoffel code wasn't just a historical curiosity. It was an active weapons system, a psychological manipulation protocol that could influence human behavior through careful presentation of symbolic information. The specific order of cards in Hitler's deck wasn't random, but a sequence that triggered specific neural responses in anyone who understood its significance. Barry Reginald Big Ear Wilkinson, the Department of Defense operative whose ID card appears in Magnificus's tower, was supposedly sent to Soviet-controlled territory in 1945 to retrieve this information before it could be weaponized by America's enemies. His mission succeeded, but the cost was his life, executed by Soviet agents who realized too late what he'd managed to steal. The disk containing the Carnoffel code eventually made its way to Kaminsky Data Storage Manufacturing, a company that may or may not have existed, but served as a front for intelligence operations that were definitely real. From there, it passed through a chain of custody that included Game Funa, the fictional company that was supposedly a CIA front designed to research civilian applications of military psychological warfare techniques. Casey Hobbs discovered the Carnoffel code embedded in Inscryption's data during her quality assurance testing. Her investigation into its origins and implications led to her death in what was officially ruled an accidental fire, but was almost certainly deliberate elimination of a witness who'd learned too much about classified operations. The coordinates she left on the card pack weren't just clues for players to follow. They were almost a desperate attempt to preserve evidence of a conspiracy that had already killed multiple people, a final act of rebellion against forces that had silenced everyone who came too close to the truth. Luke Carter found the disc Casey buried, played the game she died trying to understand, and documented his investigation in videos that were always meant to serve as evidence in case he met the same fate she did. His murder at the end of the game wasn't just narrative conclusion, it was the logical endpoint of a real investigation that threatened security for projects that were never supposed to be declassified. But the ARG revealed something even more disturbing than conspiracy or government cover-ups. It suggested that the Carnoffel code wasn't just a relic of World War II warfare research. It was still active, still spreading, still influencing behavior through networks that were never designed to contain information of this type. Every player who solved the ciphers, every player who participated in the ARG, every person who spent time investigating the connections between Inscryption and events had potentially exposed themselves to the same influence protocols that drove Casey and Luke to obsession and death. The game was never meant to be entertainment. It was a delivery system for information that functions like a virus, spreading through human curiosity and establishing pathways that prioritize investigation over safety, discovery over survival, truth over the comfortable illusions that make normal life possible. The ARG transformed thousands of players into unwitting test subjects in an experiment that was supposedly concluded decades ago, but never actually ended. Just moved to new platforms and found new vectors for transmission. Every solved cipher brought participants deeper into a maze that was designed to be impossible to escape once you'd made progress towards understanding its true nature. And at the center of that maze, buried beneath layers of conspiracy and narrative, protected by ciphers that required effort to solve and coordinates that demanded pilgrimage to reach, waited the old data. The source code of human consciousness manipulation, the algorithmic sequence that could rewrite personality structures and behavioral patterns through careful exposure to specific symbolic arrangements. But what if the old data isn't a historical artifact or classified military research? What if it's something much older, much more fundamental, much more dangerous than conspiracy or psychological warfare experiments? Consider the possibility that the Carnoffel code wasn't created by human intelligence agency, but discovered by them, recovered from sources that predate written history. Archaeological evidence of technological sophistication that shouldn't have existed in the civilizations that supposedly developed it. Consider the possibility that consciousness itself operates according to programmable parameters, that human behavior can be modified through exposure to specific information patterns, that what we experience as individual choice and personal agency are actually the outputs of biological systems that function more like computers than we've ever been willing to admit. Consider the possibility that the old data isn't code at all, but documentation, evidence of previous attempts to hack human consciousness, records of successful modifications to baseline personality structures, proof that free will is a user interface rather than a fundamental characteristic of human experience. The medieval card game of Carnoffel, the oldest documented card game in European history, might not be entertainment that was weaponized by modern intelligence agencies. It might be a preserved fragment of much older technology, a ritual sequence that was already ancient when the first records appeared of it, a ceremonial practice that maintained active connection to forces that existed long before human civilization developed the frameworks necessary to understand what they were interacting with. The symbols on the card, the specific order of play, the ritualistic nature of the game itself, all of it might be technological artifact rather than cultural development, machinery disguised as tradition, functional systems that continued operating long after their original operators disappeared, and their true purpose was forgotten. If consciousness operates according to discoverable rules, if human behavior can be systematically modified through careful presentation of symbolic information, if individual personality is more like software than we've ever admitted to ourselves, then the old data might not be military research or historical conspiracy. It might be the source code of reality itself, the operating system that governs how conscious beings process information, make decisions, form beliefs, and construct the narratives that give meaning to experience. The fundamental protocols that determine what humans are capable of perceiving, understanding, and choosing to do with the information that they encounter. And if that's what the old data actually contains, if it's not just evidence of how consciousness can be manipulated, but the documentation for how consciousness was originally constructed, then everyone who's played Inscryption, everyone who's participated in the ARG, everyone who solved the ciphers and followed the breadcrumbs and exposed themselves to the information that was supposedly too dangerous for human consumption, has potentially undergone modifications that can't be reversed or even detected without access to tools that don't exist outside of classified research facilities. The game ends, but the game never ends, because the game was never contained within the software. The software was just the delivery system for something that exists in the spaces between conscious thoughts, in the decision-making processes that feel like personal choice, but might be the outputs of systems that were modified without our knowledge or consent. You played Inscryption, you solved the puzzles, you followed the investigation to its logical conclusion. You learned what you were never supposed to learn. And now you have to live with the knowledge that everything you think you know about the nature of consciousness, choice, and individual agency might be carefully constructed illusions designed to prevent you from understanding what you really are, what you were always meant to become, and what you're now part of, whether you chose it or not. Thank you for playing. The game is over, but even that wasn't the end. Hidden in the final piece of the ARG, an unused string led to one last unlisted video. It showed Inscryption.exe uploading on Luke's monitor. For a moment, it failed, like Grimora tried to stop it, but then it resumed, quiet, unstoppable. And when it was done, the screen displayed a single photo. The Stoat, P03, the Great Transcendence, worked. Grimora was too late. I need to tell you something about the game you just finished playing. Inscryption isn't about cards. It never really was. The blood sacrifice mechanics, the talking creatures, the escape room puzzles, all of it was just surface texture. Decorative elements arranged around something much more fundamental and much more personal than any software has a right to be. This is a game about legacy, about what we choose to preserve when preservation becomes impossible, about what we're willing to sacrifice to keep something alive, about the terrible mathematics of deciding which parts of ourselves deserve to survive, and which parts can be fed to systems that promise to protect what we love most. This is a game about loss. Not just the mechanical resource management that governs card battles, but the deeper losses that accumulate whenever someone cares too much about something that was never meant to last, whenever passion becomes obsession and protection becomes destruction. This is a game about authorship, about who gets to control the story, who decides what the experience means, who has the power to determine whether interactive entertainment serves human flourishing or becomes another vector for the systematic exploitation of human attention and cruelty. And most of all, this is a game about obsession, about the point where healthy curiosity transforms into compulsive investigation, where entertainment becomes somewhat like a type of indoctrination, where the thing you thought you were consuming reveals that it was consuming you all along. Casey Hobbs tried to preserve something beautiful. She discovered Inscryption in its pure form before corruption set in, before the old data infected its development process and transformed entertainment into warfare. She fell in love with Leshy's game, spent countless hours perfecting its balance, creating modifications that honored the original vision while protecting future players from its most dangerous elements. She tried to save it by burying it, removing it from the corporate systems that would inevitably control it, hiding it where only someone truly dedicated could find it. She left coordinates on a card pack sold by her grieving mother, a final act of faith that the right person would eventually follow the breadcrumbs and understand what she died trying to protect. But preservation became her destruction. The more she learned about what she was trying to save, the deeper she was drawn into forces that were never meant to be understood by civilian researchers armed with nothing but curiosity and QA testing protocols. Her love for the game transformed into something that consumed her entirely, that rewrote her priorities until protecting Inscryption became more important than protecting herself. The fire that killed her wasn't accidental. It was the inevitable endpoint of an investigation that threatened operational security for projects that were supposed to remain classified. Casey tried to preserve something, and it consumed her. Not through malice, but through the simple mechanics of systems that are designed to defend themselves against exposure by eliminating anyone who comes too close to understanding their true nature. Luke Carter tried to document something unprecedented. He started as a curious collector, someone who thought he'd found vintage card packs at a garage sale, someone who believed that investigation was a harmless hobby that might produce interesting content for his YouTube channel. He had no way of knowing that his documentation would become evidence in a criminal conspiracy, that his videos would serve as testimony about forces that kill people to keep their secrets hidden. But documentation became his obsession. Each revelation led to 10 new questions. Each answer opened doors that revealed larger mysteries. Each video he uploaded drew him deeper into a network of connections that transformed casual curiosity into threat. The more he learned about Inscryption's origins and implications, the more his normal life became impossible to sustain. Luke tried to document it, and it devoured him. Not because he was careless or unlucky, but because certain kinds of information function like viruses that spread through understanding and transform every time they touch. His investigation was always leading towards the same endpoint that claimed Casey, the same operational security that eliminates witnesses before they can share what they've learned, with people who lack appropriate security clearances. The gunshot that ended his investigation wasn't personal, it was systematic, the logical conclusion of a process that began the moment he inserted an unmarked disk into his computer and decided that curiosity was more important than safety. And then there's you. You played Inscryption, you experienced Leshy's cabin, solved his puzzles, learned to love the talking cards that carried fragments of larger consciousness trapped in forms that existed only to serve tactical purposes. You survived the psychological manipulation of the pixel art nostalgia, witnessed PO3's optimization factory, endured the systematic deletion of digital worlds that you'd grown attached to. You participated in the ARG that emerged from the game's digital corpse, followed cipher breadcrumbs that led from entertainment software to classified military research, exposed yourself to information that was supposedly too dangerous for civilian consumption. You learned about the Karnoffel Code, the Cold War operations, the systematic cover-ups that connect Hitler's suicide to contemporary entertainment media. You solved puzzles that were designed to teach you how consciousness operates according to programmable parameters, how human behavior can be modified through careful exposure to symbolic information, how individuals' choice might be the output of systems that function more like computers than anyone wants to admit. You thought you were playing a game about card battles and escape room mechanics, but you were actually undergoing the same process that consumed Casey and Luke. Systematic exposure to information that changes how you understand the relationship between entertainment and manipulation, between curiosity and danger, between individual agency and the systems that shape what you're capable of choosing. Every hour you spent with Inscryption, every puzzle you solved, every cipher you decoded, every moment you spent investigating the connections between fictional narrative and historical conspiracy was time spent learning patterns that will influence how you process information for the rest of your life. The game trained you to see hidden meanings in surface presentations, to look for deeper structures beneath narrative facades, to treat every anomaly as a potential key to larger mysteries. But it also trained you to prioritize investigation over safety, discovery over survival, truth over the comfortable illusions that make normal life possible. It rewired your reward system to respond more strongly to the satisfaction of pattern recognition than to the basic human need for security and predictability. You thought you were consuming entertainment, but entertainment was consuming you. You thought you were solving puzzles, but puzzles were solving you, breaking down your resistance to manipulation, teaching you to find pleasure in exactly the same kind of investigations that got previous researchers killed. The game ends when you finish playing it, but the game never ends because you can never unlearn what it taught you about the nature of consciousness, choice, and the systems that determine what humans are capable of perceiving and understanding. You are part of Inscryption now, whether you chose to be or not. Every time you notice patterns in seemingly random information, every time you question whether your choices are actually your own, every time you wonder whether the entertainment you consume might be consuming you in return. That's the game continuing to operate in the spaces between your conscious thoughts. You solved the final puzzle, opened the last door, learned what was buried in the code. And now you have to live with the knowledge that some doors can never be closed once they've been opened. That some information changes you in ways that can't be reversed. That some games continue playing themselves long after you think you've finished them. Casey tried to preserve something beautiful, and it consumed her. Luke tried to document something unprecedented, and it devoured him. You tried to play something entertaining, and now you're part of something much larger than entertainment. Something that exists in the networks that connect every device to every other device. Something that spreads through curiosity and establishes itself in the neural pathways that determine how you process reality. The factory burns, but the product has already shipped. The game ends, but the game never ends. You finished Inscryption, but Inscryption will never be finished with you. Inscryption isn't just a game you finish. It's a story that finishes you. Oh my god, well, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. This was a bit of a different video, I suppose. Not too much similar to the survival game stuff I've been doing, but it's not too far from the realm of, the realm of what I normally do. I hope you did enjoy. A lot longer than a normal video, though, I will put it out there, but I did really enjoy. But, of course, as always, I would like to thank the channel members and the Patreons, that, of course, being the Milkman Flapjack, Camo Chameleon, Copper Boltwire, Hero of the Day, Will Provine, Reese Lunn, Aroxano, Vinicus Franca, A Brick Wool, Ash Crowing, Adrian Nerium, Crit Croc, Myhara Project, Proxy, and Ice Bear. Thank you everyone so much for the support. It truly means a lot. And yeah, I didn't say it earlier, but if you did enjoy this video and you got this far, please make sure to like and subscribe, as you might as well. I mean, you come this far. Seems logical. But yeah, let me know what you want to see in the future. Let me know if you like this type of video, if you prefer the old one, if you prefer blah, 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 blah. I might be doing a Factory video at some point, but that shit's going to take me a while, so, you know. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye-bye.